In our last video, we talked about finding that great pearl, the treasure of your heart, so that you may commit yourself fully and find fullness, not only in this lifetime, but in the lifetime to come, in the afterlife. This is your mission here in the Canoma, in the Matrix. The world that we live in will work overtime to prevent you from having that self-identity, finding that individuation. It will tell you all the things that you should be, all the things that you should not be. It will coerce you to identify with things that are material things like money, or it's being a certain title, popularity, lack of popularity, so forth and so on. Sinful, not sinful. These are the machinations of the demiurge and their minions to keep you under control. And the way in which the demiurge does this, as Christ succinctly has continued to tell us, is to divide and conquer, to divide group among groups, scapegoat groups, and to pit groups against one another. It's the Mexicans, it's the white people, it's the black people, it's the gays, it's the straights, it's female, it's men, it's Muslims, it's Christians, so forth and so on. This is what allows for the demiurge to then go about and plot its ultimate goal, which is world domination. And you see this here in this nation going on today, where we are erecting more division and scapegoating certain groups. And those same groups also in turn scapegoat the ones that are scapegoating them. So everybody's pointing fingers at one another. Meanwhile, the powers that be spend the vast majority of the taxpayers' money fashioning war and also creating a storm around why we should have the right to go to war against these other countries. Of course, they're going to make them look like they're evil. So they'll bring out the worst parts of those countries. And then, of course, that gives them fodder to get support. Now, this is what the demiurge does, because ultimately he wants to dominate, and this is something that we'll come to see as we continue in other Gnostic texts. We'll come to further understand the details of what's going on in the world today. But this is where we left off, and let's pick up on verse 85, and let's talk about how can one find that true self amidst all the craziness around them, the distractions, the misdirections, so forth and so on. Verse 85, Jesus said, "Adam came from great power and great wealth, but he was not worthy of you." And here this is reminiscent of Christ earlier saying that those who know the Christ are more worthy than even John the Baptist, who is considered the most greatest prophet in heaven. So even you are considered greater than John the Baptist if you have the understanding of Gnosis, the understanding of the true Father. See, what Christ is ultimately telling you, it isn't that John the Baptist was the most worthy among prophets because of his prophecy, but it was that he saw the Christ. But you today have the capacity to not only and to see the Christ, but you also have the ability to have the God within you work in your favor. And so that makes you even more so capable of fulfilling your ultimate purpose for being here. And so this is what Christ is talking about. And Adam also, who was the first flesh man in the Garden of Eden among the Hebrew race, even he, even though Christ came to him and brought him the tree from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what Christ told Adam is that you're following after a God called the demiurge. That's not really your God. But he didn't fully understand who Christ is. Now, on hindsight, we do have the understanding, the fuller understanding of who Christ is, now that he actually walked and spoke much about what he came to represent, that Adam didn't have the privilege to hear or to know about. And so this is what makes us worthy, is the truth is what makes us worthy, the truth that Christ brings us, and that we're part of that truth. It isn't something that you do or don't do. It isn't something that you get judged about in some afterlife. That you're a wretch and you're worthless, and therefore you have to accept Christ in name and the story that he died after 3 days and rose, and that you're a beast and you need to feel shameful and guilty and remorseful for just being you, no matter however small the slight is or consideration of what is called sin, that you have to grovel yourself before God and feel shameful and pitiful, and that accept that Christ brought his son to die on a bloody cross to appease his anger against you because of something that your ancestors did, which probably is not even part of your lineage if you're Gentile, some 6,000 years ago. A man and a woman who did not even have access to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So how would they know the difference between good and evil, even if the Jehovah God had told them this is what is good and this is what is evil? All Jehovah did is forbid them from having access to those trees. But of course, since they didn't even have understanding of the knowledge or difference between good and evil, how could they be held responsible? But yet they are by Jehovah. And not just that, But furthermore, you also are held responsible for an action that you didn't even participate in. So this is what we have today. So it continues, for had he been worthy, he would not have tasted death. And here again, Adam, of course, ultimately died after living 900 and something years. And here Christ is not talking about the body dying, but he's talking about the spirit dying, the understanding of what brings eternal life. See, Adam at some point, that flesh Adam died. The spirit part had to be reborn, reincarnated. Now we're not sure who he reincarnated into, but there are some prophets that we can take canonical texts and Gnostic texts to understand who they may have reincarnated into. For example, there is speculation that John the Baptist was reincarnation of Elijah, for example. But here, this is what Christ is talking about. He's saying that you don't have to taste this understanding of what death is, which is it's the end, it's miserable, or that you're going to die and have to stand before God, being frightened, naked before God, and only Christ can redeem you. And hopefully a great deal of the proto-Orthodox Christians will tell you have to work your way into heaven. Even though you've accepted Christ, you have to follow a certain set of commandments, otherwise you'll go to hell, you see. But Christ is saying you don't have to taste that bitterness and that fear about God, the God of terror and fear and tyranny. That's not your God, you see. Your God is the true Father who loves you in grace and understanding, has created you just as was intended from the beginning. So verse 86, Jesus said, foxes have their dens and birds have their nests, but human beings have no place to lay down and rest. And here Christ is talking about we don't have a home here in this realm. You can build a house, but the property doesn't ultimately belong to you. Even though you may purchase it, when you pass away, someone else will come along and take it. And so you don't really have a place. And you're constantly preoccupied with the things of this world. So you're never at rest. You're never at peace. You're always worried about this and that, paying the bills. What's going to happen to this nation? Are we going to get bombed by, are we going to go to war? Is there going to be nuclear bombs? Is the neighbor going to come and rob me? What does my boss think? What do my parents think? So forth and so on. This is the kind of misery that we live in. The birds have their nests and the foxes have their dens. They only think about sleeping, resting, and going and finding food, some degree of shelter to get away from carnivorous animals. But humans have more than that to have to deal with. So ultimately, we don't find a place we can lay down and rest. What Christ's really saying here is that it's because we have abandoned our true home. Our home is not here, and so there is no place to rest. So on 87, he continues, Jesus said, how miserable is the body that depends on a body, and how miserable is the soul that depends on these two. So the body here that we have to depend on, think about how restrictive it is. You only can jump so far. You maybe can jump 1 or 2 feet. If you jump more than that, say 8 feet, you're going to probably break a leg. You can't go out into space, so you're stuck here in this biosphere. You can't go underwater no more than 1 or 2 minutes, otherwise you'll die. You can't live that long without consuming flesh, or some form of flesh, whether it be plant flesh or animal flesh. And so Christ is saying this is a miserable state to have to be in, to have to rely on this body that constantly needs attention. In addition to that, what's even more miserable is the soul that not only needs the body to survive, but it has a psyche that gets easily scarred by what the parents said, by what society demands, by what the pastor said, what the president said, so forth and so on. All these impact everyone because we're so divided. You see, we're not full. We don't live in the world of unity. We live in a world of division, the world of the devil. And so this is what Christ is saying, that how miserable is the body that depends on the flesh, and how miserable is the soul that depends on these two, meaning the flesh and the soul, that depends on the psyche and also the flesh body. How miserable that must be. Think about how in bondage we are to these entities. We are very much in bondage, and we rely so much on the machinations of the modern world. The heat that comes through your air conditioning system or the heating system, the vehicle that you drive back and forth. But even that's precarious. You could get into a car accident. If you go visit your parents on another side of the country, you might get into an airplane accident. It's very precarious. You might go through the street and get shot. If you go out into the woods, then most likely, eventually, you'll be eaten by some animal. And there are many, many animals out there that could eat you. And then not just that, but in addition, for the first 15 to 18 years of your life, you're growing. But then after that, you start to die slowly, a slow death. This is what you have. Christ talking about what is so miserable. Verse 88, Jesus said, the messengers and the prophets will come to you and give you what belongs to you. You in turn give them what you have and say to yourselves, when will they come and take what belongs to them? This is a very astounding saying and very mysterious. You don't fully understand Gnostic text, you're not going to understand what Christ is saying here. You only have the understanding of canonical text. You're going to miss this one. You're not going to get it. But you have the understanding of Gnostic text, and maybe you're listening for the first time, so maybe you don't. But hopefully those that have been listening along the way will be able to kind of catch on what's Christ saying here. He's saying that the messengers and the prophets, they foretold of Christ's coming. So the messengers and the prophets will come to you and give you what belongs to you. So they will give you the truth that, yes, the Christ is coming. So give you hope that there's redemption, that there is a heaven coming in the form of a Messiah. So that Messiah has come, you see. You, in turn, give them what you have. So what do you do in turn? This thing that was freely given to you, you then feel obligated to give them everything. So what Christ is saying, whether you know this or not, these messengers and prophets used you, not because they really wanted the Christ to come, but because they had an idea that they were serving and wanted to get you to serve it as well, about what the Christ should be. And that Christ should, of course, come with a sword and should dominate and, whack a bunch of heads off and then put a big crown on a throne and say, all Israel rules the planet, you see. And then everyone would come and worship that king. And that king was supposed to represent God in some form, symbolically in some way. And this is what the messengers and prophets came to say. But when they initially came, the intention was to understand this Messiah being the Redeemer. And so they brought what was rightfully yours to you, this understanding of the Messiah. You, in turn, give them what you have. But what you don't understand is you didn't get anything from it. In fact, what little you had was taken away because you gave it to them, is what Christ is saying. You gave all your power to them, and that's the priests, Sadducees, Pharisees, the rabbis, the imams, all of the so-called leaders of the churches and their different machinations, the different permutations. Muslim, Judean, Christian, they're all the same. Or even if it's agnostic or atheist, then there are politicians you give your power to, or government you give your power to, because they're going to save you, you see. And so here it goes on and says, after you give everything to them, you go further. You say, when will they come and take what belongs to them? So you actually believe that these messengers and these prophets were appointed to be in a position to appoint the Christ. So they're the ones that have power, not the Christ. But they're the ones who will tell you who the Christ is. The Christ is not in the position to actually tell you, no, I'm the Christ. But instead you give authority to them and you say, when will they come and tell us who is the Christ? That's what it says. When will they come and take what belongs to them? You see that? This is what the masses of people do. They give all their power to the authority and they wait for the authority to tell them, is it the Christ? Is that new president the beast? Is it the end of the world? Did God appoint President Obama or President Trump? And they go to church and the pastor says, Trump was appointed by God. And they say, and they marvel and they go, yes, you're right. And they bow down, they give their money away, they give all their power and their self-capacity for critical thinking. They give it all away. And so that's what they're doing. When will they come and take what belongs to them? So here, Christ is further saying that whether they understand this or not, the crowd that he's speaking to, the crowd is going to be the one that will give a verdict against Christ. The crowd is actually going to say to the Pharisees and Sadducees, when are you going to take this Christ, what rightfully belongs to you, and crucify him? When will you pass judgment on him? As Christ is saying this to the crowd, but the vast majority of the ones listening at that time were not getting it. And verse 89, Jesus said, why do you wash the outside of the cup? Don't you understand that the one who made the inside is also the one who made the outside? So he's following up this verse from the previous verse because he is saying that you guys are worshiping law. And this idea that everything is supposed to be a certain way, which creates limitations. This is why he follows 87 with 88 and 89. First he says in 87, how miserable is the body because it's limited, you see. How miserable is the soul because it's scarred and it's easily persuaded and deceived. And then he says in 88, you actually are going to be deceived. And then furthermore, in 89 he says, you're going to be deceived by the messengers and prophets who will condemn me and put me on the cross through law. And so in 89 he's saying, you're going to limit yourself with those laws. Why do you wash the outside of your cup? Don't you understand that the one who made the inside is also the one who made the outside? Just cleaning the outside doesn't make you better, doesn't make you pure or clean. It's what is in the inside that matters, you see. It's not the show, what you do at church or what you do in front of people and those kinds of things. That's what Christ is saying. You're giving all your power away because you believe that it's supposed to be a certain way and according to what the messengers and prophets tell you it's supposed to be. And so you just follow them blindly. In verse 90, Jesus said, come to me, for my yoke is comfortable and my lordship is gentle, and you will find rest for yourselves. See how he's completing those previous verses in one short little sentence? Remember earlier in 87 he talked about how miserable the body is, how limited it is, how miserable the soul is, how easily scarred it is, is. And then 89, he talks about the messengers and prophets will bring you this idea of the Messiah, but then you will give, rather than getting something from it, you'll actually give everything, the little you have, to them. In addition, you'll ask them to take what little hope that they may be brought you. You'll say, well, when are they going to come and take what rightfully belongs to them back? And then Jesus said, you do this because you believe in laws where you limit yourself. And you think it's about this, whether or not you do this or that, based upon a set of rules, Levitical law, Mosaic law, etc. And what the pastor and preachers tell you. This all brings you discomfort and lack of rest, and it's harsh. But Jesus said, come to me, for my yoke is comfortable, my lordship is gentle, and you will find rest for yourselves through me. In verse 91, they said to him, tell us who you are, so that we may believe in you. He said to them, you examine the face of heaven and earth, but you have not come to know the one who is in your presence, and you do not know how to examine the present moment. Is Christ trying to avoid this question here? Why is he being so coy and indirect to them? Why is he saying something completely different from what we might expect? Why doesn't he just say, well, I'm the Son of God, and I come from the true Father, and all these things? Well, first off, because he's already said this many, many times, and they wouldn't hear. So he's saying it in a way that helps them to know where to look when he leaves. He says, examine the face of heaven and earth. You have not come to know who is in your presence. So he's saying two things already. He says, I'm in heaven, I'm on earth, I'm in you. I'm all around you. My presence is everywhere. And you did not know how to examine. So he's asking you to examine. Teach yourself how to examine. The present moment. Not something in the past, what the Sadducees and Pharisees predicted. Not somewhere in the future, but in the present moment. See, Christ is asking you to be present. This is who he really is. It's a moment of peace and a moment of contentment and acceptance of the present moment. A place of rest and comfort and gentleness. This is what the Christ is. And he's in everything. He's everywhere. This is what he's saying. He's saying to them, if he just simply said, well, I come from the Father, how distant that would seem to them. They would say, well, okay, well, that must be billions of miles away. No, he's saying, I'm everywhere. And not just is he telling them I'm everywhere and always have been, but he's saying that in the way to access me is to be in the moment. In addition to not only being in the moment, but getting yourself to have self-reflection by saying, you do not know how to examine the present moment. And now he's going to tell you, he's not just going to leave them hanging, but he's actually going to tell them in verse 92 how to examine that present moment. Jesus said, seek and you will find. In the past, however, I did not tell you the things about which you asked me then. Now I'm willing to tell them, but you are not seeking them. So the answer here is seek it. Seek out the answer and you'll find it. In the past, he was not to say these things when they asked him because they were not ready to hear. But now that they are, now that they're capable of understanding, they're not willing to hear it because they're not willing to seek out the truth. In other words, what Christ is saying here, he's saying that I've given you everything already. Now you have to go and look for it within yourself. I've already told you it is everywhere. I've already told you that's in the present moment. I've already told you that I'm leaving because you are going to set it up so that the messengers and prophets take me. I've already told you these things in the ways that I can. And the only thing you have left to do is to be willing to find it. And once you're willing to find it, once you're willing to have the commitment and the passion and the wherewithal to find your truth and you commit to that, then you will find it. He does not say you won't find it. You might find it. He says you will find it. Jesus said, seek and you will find. You see, Christ can't just come and say to you, this is what it looks like, because everything is different. The Christ is different to everyone. If Christ said, well, it's like a small house, a cottage by the sea. Well, one person will say, well, I don't like cottage by the sea. I don't even like the water. So you have to find that truth for you. What is your heaven? What is your Christ? This is what he's saying to you. So seek it and you will find it. That's the part you have to have faith in. What everybody tends to avoid in seeking, the reason most everyone avoids seeking is because they don't have the faith that when they seek it, they'll find it. But Christ has given you the assurance that what's keeping you from finding it is that you don't seek it. The finding part is already done for you. You have something in you, a passion, a calling. Do you really believe that that calling is just there for no purpose? That's like saying there's a seed in the ground with no purpose, or apples on a tree for no purpose. They all have a purpose, correct? And so the seeking part is the part you have to do. The finding part is already done for you. It's already found. You know where it is. You just have to start looking for it. You have to go toward it, you see. That's what Christ is saying. He goes from 92 and he explains to you how to do it, how to find it. It's by seeking it. Now he's going to tell you what are those things that you should not do. Because if you do those things you shouldn't do, then you're going to not find it. So now he's going to tell you what that looks like. In verse 93, Don't give what is holy to dogs, for they might throw them upon the manure pile. Don't throw pearls to pigs, or they might, it doesn't say what it says here, it's just got ... Lost in translation here. Christ is saying here is that you have something in you that is holy. It's your fullness. It is godly. It is Christ. It is the most holy thing you can have. And you need to protect that and guard that. And not just tell anybody. You know, like a seed in the ground? When you have a seed in the ground, it has to be in the dark before it can ferment. If you put it out in the sun, it's not going to ferment. It has to be put deeply into the soil. See, life itself has all the answers for you. Humans are no different. We are part of the universe. So if you want to understand the spiritual laws, look at the laws of the universe, and they are symbolically the spiritual laws, and vice versa. The spiritual laws are also symbolically the physical laws. They are one and the same. So Christ is saying to you, when you first have this idea or inclination about what you want to do in your life's calling, don't just go out and publicize it to everyone. Because there are people out there that want to steal. There are people out there that are dogs that will take it and throw it in crap, you see, the manure pile. Or don't take your pearl that he talked about, the hem of the pearl, that precious pearl. Don't just throw it to a pig. There are greedy people out there who will just eat it blindly and without discrimination because they're reckless and they're greedy. So when you first have this understanding of what is moving in you, your spirit that's moving you toward your calling to bring about the fullness of your name so that you may add to the godhood, the godship in the pleroma when you go back, you bring that wisdom and knowledge with you of that experience of your unique self, it is very vulnerable. Only share it with those that you absolutely know you can trust and that can appreciate the holiness of what you are endeavoring to do or become. All the other ones, they should not be in a position of being worthy to hear. Let it come forth in its own way, in its own light. Let the light shine. Shining the light is not publicizing it. Shining the light is just being the essence of yourself and letting that grow into its full self. And that in and of itself will be providence, just as Christ was providence. In verse 94, Jesus said, "One who seeks will find, and for one who knocks it will be opened." So he's just confirming further. He's just nailing it home to you, saying it several times so that you will not doubt. That if you go out and you search your passion, you go out and find your truth, don't doubt it. Don't doubt that you're worthy to receive the fullness of whatever your calling is. But if you don't go seek it, you're not going to find it. And understand that the only reason you're not going to seek it is because you don't feel or believe that you can find it. So this is what it means to believe in the Christ. To believe in the Christ is to believe that He has told you you will find it. You see? The universe is conspiring in your favor. Pronoia, one of the gifts of Barbelo, the mother, is being bestowed on all of everyone. The gnosis within us, moving, the wisdom, the Sophia, is going to move you and grow you toward finding your calling, finding your name. You must have faith in that. You must believe in that. You must believe in the Christ within you in order to find it. Because if you don't believe in the Christ, then you're not going to believe you're going to find it. You don't believe you have the Christ in you to find it. But you don't have the rest and the movement within you to find it. And so you don't even seek it. So this is why he keeps repeating it. And for those who knock, it will be open. Now, what does he mean by knock? By knock, it means that you have to get out and you have to open doors. You have to take chances. Even though it may be a stranger or maybe a new job or a new situation or circumstance that you've never been in before, we have to knock. And the most scary thing is knocking on that door that is not familiar to you. You've never been behind that door before. It is unknown what's behind that door. So you have to knock and you have to open it. But guess what? If you do knock, it will be open. In other words, Christ has not only found it for you, but He also has set the path for you. He says, "For if you knock, it will be opened." So think about how majestic that is. Imagine that you're walking down a road of petals and you're going toward your heart's desire and you're just knocking and then the door is open. You keep going, you knock it, the door opens, it knocks, the door opens. How much more royal treatment do you want? Pronoia, the Christ, Sophia, the Father are all on your side, despite what everything the churches throughout the generations and centuries have told you that have misled you and made you preoccupy yourself with that person down the street or your neighbor or your sister or your brother and what they should be, so that you're constantly preoccupied with everything else is going on around you and what everything else around you should be, and therefore you have no time to consider who you are and what you want to become. This is what Christ is saying. This is all laid out for you. You only need to go out and seek it and knock. There's another way of saying ask and you will receive. If you are starting to seek and you're not sure where to go, then ask for wisdom. Ask for guidance. It will be given to you. Doors will come. And that's another little secret, is that when doors are shut and they remain shut, no matter how much you try, that means that door is not the way to go, okay? So that's where I'm going to leave it, and we'll pick up on the next video, video number 10, verse number 95. Bye-bye.